The chamber was so large that clouds formed near its ceiling. Ambassador Thomas Reed stood at the center of it, alone, surrounded by darkness and the weight of 1,000 watching eyes. A single beam of golden light fell from somewhere far above, illuminating him like a specimen under examination. Beyond that light, rising in endless tiers that disappeared into shadow, sat the representatives of 647 spacefaring civilizations. This was the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council, the most powerful governing body in known space. And Thomas Reed was the first human to ever stand before it. His translator implant buzzed constantly, struggling to process the whispers that surrounded him. Clicking sounds from insectoid species, low vibrations from beings made of living crystal, high-pitched frequencies from creatures that communicated in ways humans could barely perceive. All of them were talking about him, about humanity, about the tiny species from a backwater planet that had dared to request membership in galactic civilization, the arbiter of the council, a massive serpentine being whose scales shifted through colors that had no names in human language, raised one of its many limbs for silence. "The petition has been received," the arbiter announced. Its voice resonated through the chamber like thunder. "The species designated human, from the Sol system, seeks recognition as a spacefaring civilization with full rights under council law." More whispers, more clicking, something that might have been laughter from the upper tiers. Thomas kept his expression neutral. He had been warned about this. Humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. In galactic terms, they were infants, newcomers, barely worth noticing. "The Dominion of Keth has filed an objection," the arbiter continued. Thomas felt his stomach tighten. The Keth were why he was really here. Not for membership. For survival. A figure emerged from the darkness of the upper tiers. The Keth representative was tall and thin, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with faint bioluminescence. Its movements were graceful and predatory. "The Keth Dominion objects on grounds of territorial violation," the representative said. Its voice was smooth and cold. 43 years ago, human vessels entered Keth space without authorization. This was an act of war. Thomas stepped forward. "May I respond?" The arbiter's scales flickered. "You may. 43 years ago, humanity sent its first exploratory vessel beyond our solar system. The vessel was unmanned. It carried no weapons. Its purpose was scientific discovery." Thomas paused, letting his words settle. "The Keth destroyed it without warning. Then they traced its origin back to Earth." Silence in the chamber now, heavy and expectant. "For the past 4 decades, the Keth have maintained a blockade around our system. They have prevented us from establishing colonies. They have restricted our trade. They have treated humanity as criminals for the crime of existing." The Keth representative made a sound that the translator rendered as contempt. "Your species violated our borders. The consequences are appropriate." "We did not know your borders existed," Thomas replied. "We did not know you existed? We sent a probe into empty space, and you murdered it." "Murdered?" The Keth representative's eyes glowed brighter. "You speak of a machine as if it had life. I speak of intent. That probe carried a message of peace. Mathematical equations, music, images of our world and our people. It was our hand extended in friendship." Thomas's voice hardened. "You burned it and came to threaten us." The chamber stirred. This was not how junior species were supposed to speak to established powers. There were protocols, traditions. Humanity was supposed to beg for mercy, not make accusations. The Keth representative turned to address the council directly. "You see the nature of this species. Aggressive, defiant. They do not understand their place in the galaxy." It paused for effect. "The Dominion formally requests that the Council authorize military action against the Sol system." Humanity must be contained before they become a threat. Thomas had been waiting for this moment. "Before you vote," he said, "I would like to present evidence." The arbiter's scales shifted to a shade that suggested surprise. "Evidence of what nature?" "Evidence that will change how this council views humanity." Thomas reached into his coat and withdrew a small device. "Evidence that will change everything." The Keth representative made a sharp gesture. "This is irregular. The human has no right to present evidence in a territorial dispute." "I invoke the right of challenge," Thomas said. The chamber went absolutely silent. Even the constant background noise of alien whispers stopped completely. The arbiter leaned forward, its massive body coiling with apparent interest. "You invoke the right of challenge? Do you understand what that means?" "I do. You are challenging the Keth Dominion's claim directly. If your evidence is found insufficient, humanity forfeits all rights under council law. Your species will be declared hostile and subject to unrestricted military response." Thomas nodded. "I understand. And if your evidence is sufficient, then the Keth must answer for their actions against us." The Keth representative laughed. It was an ugly sound, filled with certainty. "Let the human present his evidence. Let the council see what primitives consider proof." Thomas activated the device. Above him, holographic light bloomed into existence, filling the vast chamber with images and data. 40 years ago, when the Keth first blockaded our system, humanity had 12 interplanetary vessels and no military fleet. The hologram showed Earth, small and blue and vulnerable. We were defenseless. We knew it. The Keth knew it. The image shifted. Today, humanity has something different. The hologram now showed ships. Human ships. Not the crude vessels of 40 years ago, but something else entirely. Sleek, powerful, unlike anything the Council had seen before. Over the past 4 decades, while the Keth kept us trapped in our own system, we did not sit idle. We built, we researched, we prepared. The Keth representative's glowing eyes narrowed. Preparing weapons is not evidence of peaceful intent. No, Thomas agreed. But this is... The hologram shifted again. This time it showed the Keth blockade fleet. Massive warships arranged in a sphere around the Sol system. Thousands of vessels representing the military might of an ancient civilization. Then the image flickered. One by one, the Keth ships began to disappear from the display. Not destroyed, simply gone, vanishing like smoke in wind. The Keth representative stood very still. "What is this?" "This is a live feed," Thomas said quietly. "This is happening right now." Chaos erupted in the chamber. The arbiter called for order. Species that had been half asleep moments ago were now fully alert, their attention locked on the holographic display. "What have you done?" the Keth representative demanded. Thomas looked at the alien with something that might have been pity. "We learned something about fire." "Fire?" "Your species evolved on a world without it. Most species in this council did. Fire was death to your ancestors. Something to fear and avoid." Thomas paused. "But humans evolved with fire. We learned to control it, to use it. It became the foundation of everything we built." The hologram showed another image now. A human hand reaching into flames without burning. "You thought keeping us contained would make us weak. Instead, you gave us time. Time to study your technology. Time to understand your weaknesses. Time to develop something new." The display showed the Keth blockade fleet again. The ships were not destroyed. They were disabled, drifting, dark. "Thermal cascade weaponry," Thomas explained. "We learned to generate and direct heat at levels your species cannot survive. Every ship in your blockade is now running on emergency power. Their crews are unconscious from heat exposure, not dead. We made sure of that. The Keth representative was trembling now. Not with fear, with rage. This is an act of war. No, Thomas said. This is a demonstration. We could have destroyed your fleet. We chose not to. We could have killed thousands of your people. We saved them instead. He turned to address the full council. Humanity is not asking for membership anymore. We are not begging for rights. We are showing you what we are capable of, and we are giving you a choice. The chamber was utterly silent. You can accept us as equals. You can work with us to build something better. Or you can try to stop us. Thomas looked up at the endless tiers of watching aliens. But understand this. We have been forged in fire. We know how to burn. And we know when not to. The arbiter scales had shifted to a color Thomas had never seen before. When it spoke, its voice was different, softer, almost respectful. What does humanity want? Thomas smiled. It was not a threatening expression. It was the smile of someone who had waited a very long time for this moment. We want what everyone wants. A seat at the table. A voice in the future. A chance to show the galaxy what fire can build instead of what it can destroy. He looked directly at the Keth representative. And we want the ones who tried to cage us to understand that the cage is now open. What happens next is up to them. The Keth representative said nothing. There was nothing left to say. In the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council, 647 species watched as humanity announced its arrival. Not as beggars. Not as conquerors. As something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that held fire in their hands and chose how to use it. The vote would come later. The debates would rage for days. But everyone in that chamber knew that everything had changed. Humanity had arrived. And the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Helena Cross stood on the bridge of the U.S. Prometheus and watched the Keth fleet drift in the darkness of space. 3,000 warships. The pride of an empire that had dominated this sector for 10,000 years. Now they floated like dead leaves on still water. Their engines cold, their weapons silent. Their crews alive, but unconscious from the thermal pulse that had swept through their hulls. Helena felt no satisfaction. Only wait. Status report, she said quietly. Commander David Torres looked up from his console. All Keth vessels confirmed disabled. Life support is stable across the fleet. Estimated time until their crews regain consciousness is 4 hours. Rescue operations? Already underway. Medical teams are boarding the command vessels first. We're prioritizing any ships showing signs of environmental failure. Helena nodded. This was the part of the plan that mattered most. Not the attack. The aftermath. 40 years ago, when the Keth had surrounded Earth and trapped humanity in their own solar system, the military strategists had wanted to fight. They had built weapons, trained soldiers, prepared for a war they knew they could not win. But Dr. Alice Munro, the xenoanthropologist who had spent her entire career studying the species of the galaxy from intercepted signals and captured technology, had proposed something different. They expect us to fight or surrender, she had written in her famous report. Those are the only options they understand. We need to show them a third possibility. The doctrine of embers. Helena had memorized it years ago. Every officer in the fleet had. It was more than a military strategy. It was a philosophy, a way of showing the galaxy what humanity truly was. Strike hard. Strike precisely. And then save everyone you can. Her communications officer spoke up. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the council chamber. Ambassador Reed is requesting a status update. Put it through. Thomas Reed's face appeared on the main view screen. He looked tired but alert. Behind him, Helena could see the chaos of the Grand Assembly. Hundreds of alien species trying to understand what had just happened. "Helena," Thomas said, "what's your situation?" "Fleet is secured. No casualties on either side. The Keth commander is unconscious, but stable. We'll have him awake and ready for transport within 6 hours." Thomas let out a breath. "The Council is in an uproar. Half of them want to declare us a threat to galactic peace. The other half are too afraid to say anything. And the Keth representative? Still here. Still angry. But I think some part of him understands what we've done." Thomas paused. "He keeps asking why we didn't kill them." Helena looked at the drifting Keth ships on her view screen. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That fire can destroy or it can forge. That we chose to forge." Helena almost smiled. Thomas had always been better with words than she was. That was why he was the ambassador, and she was the one with the fleet. Different tools for different purposes, but the same goal. "There's something else," Thomas said. His expression shifted to something more serious. "The Morith delegation has requested a private meeting." Helena felt a chill run down her spine. The Morith were old, ancient beyond human comprehension. Silicon-based life forms that existed on timescales that made organic species seem like mayflies. They rarely spoke in council sessions. When they did, it was usually to announce something that changed the galaxy. What do they want? They want to talk about fire. Helena and her bridge crew exchanged glances. The Morith had been present at the founding of the Galactic Council. They had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. If they wanted to talk about fire, it meant something. "Be careful," Helena said. "The Morith don't waste words." "I know." Thomas looked over his shoulder at something off-screen. "They're waiting for me now. Keep the fleet on standby. Whatever happens in this meeting, I suspect we'll need to move quickly." The transmission ended. Helena turned back to her view screen and the field of disabled warships. 3,000 vessels. 3,000 crews. Tens of thousands of Keth soldiers who had expected to spend their lives guarding a cage that no longer existed. "Admiral?" Torres approached her station. "The Keth commander is starting to wake up. Medical teams are asking how to proceed." Helena thought for a moment. The Keth commander, a being called Admiral Vorn, had spent decades maintaining the blockade around Earth. He had ordered the destruction of human probes. He had enforced the isolation that was meant to slowly strangle human civilization. In any other war, he would be an enemy. A target. Someone to be captured and interrogated and eventually executed. But this was not any other war. "Treat him with dignity," Helena said. "Medical care, food, and water. And when he's ready to talk, bring him to me." Torres looked uncertain. "You want to meet with him personally?" "Yes." Helena turned to face her first officer directly. "He needs to understand what's happening. Not from our weapons, from our words." 3 hours later, Admiral Vorn stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, surrounded by human officers and guards. He was taller than any human, his obsidian skin still bearing traces of the thermal damage his ship had sustained. His glowing eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of the human vessel. Helena approached him without weapons drawn. "Admiral Vorn," she said. "I am Admiral Helena Cross. I wanted to speak with you directly." Vorn's translator rendered his response in a flat, mechanical tone. "You have attacked my fleet, disabled my ships, invaded my vessels. And now you want to speak?" "Yes. Why?" Helena gestured at the view screen, which showed human medical teams working aboard Keth vessels, treating injured crew members and repairing damaged life support systems. "Because we want you to see this." Vorn watched in silence as human doctors helped Keth soldiers, as human engineers stabilized Keth reactors, as human rescue teams searched Keth ships for anyone who might need assistance. "I do not understand," he finally said. "We are your enemies. We caged your species for 40 years. Why are you helping us?" Helena met his glowing eyes. "Because that's what fire does. Fire destroys. Fire does many things. It destroys, yes, but it also warms. It lights the darkness. It cooks food and forges metal and powers civilization." Helena paused. "We learned a long time ago that fire is not good or evil. It is a tool. What matters is how you use it." Vorn was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter. "Your species evolved with fire. We knew this. It was one of the reasons we feared you." "Feared us?" "In our history, fire species are rare. They appear, they burn brightly, and then they burn out. They destroy themselves or they destroy everything around them. We thought containing you would prevent that fate." Helena shook her head slowly. "You thought trapping us would make us safe? Caging fire doesn't make it weaker. It makes it more dangerous. I understand that now." Vorn looked at the view screen again. "But what I do not understand is why you stopped. You had the power to destroy us completely. Why spare us?" Helena walked to the view screen and stood beside the Keth Admiral, both of them watching Human and Keth working together across the void. "Because destruction is easy," she said. "Anyone can burn something down. The hard part is building something up. The hard part is taking all that fire and using it to create instead of destroy." She turned to face him. "We could have killed your fleet. We could have pushed past you and invaded your homeworld. We could have done what fire species have always done." Helena paused. "We chose differently. We chose to show you that fire can be controlled, that we can burn without consuming everything we touch." Vorn stood very still. "What do you want from us?" "Acknowledgement. Justice for the decades of imprisonment. And an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" Helena smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. "An opportunity to show you what fire can build. We have technologies you've never imagined. Ways of harnessing energy that your civilization considered impossible. We want to share them. We want to work with you, not against you. Why would you share your weapons with former enemies? They're not weapons. They're tools. The same fire that disabled your fleet can power cities, heat worlds, drive ships across the galaxy faster than anything you've built. We've spent 40 years developing these things, and we want to use them for something other than war." Vorn's glowing eyes flickered. "The Council will never agree. The Keth Dominion will never agree. Our cultures are not designed for this kind of cooperation." Helena nodded. "I know. That's why we're not asking the Council or the Dominion. We're asking you, one leader to another. One person who has seen what fire can do to another person who has just experienced it." She extended her hand, a human gesture that Vorn could not possibly understand. "Help us show the galaxy that fire doesn't have to mean destruction. Help us build something new." Vorn looked at her hand for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out with one of his own limbs. "I do not know if this will work," he said. "My people have feared fire for 10,000 years. That fear will not disappear easily." "Neither will ours," Helena replied. "We've spent 40 years afraid of you, afraid of the galaxy, afraid of what would happen when the cage finally opened." She grasped his limb gently. "But fear is just another kind of fire. It can paralyze you, or it can drive you forward. The choice is ours." Across the void of space, human and Keth ships drifted together in the aftermath of a battle that had changed everything. Not through destruction. Through something far more powerful, Dot. Through the first spark of understanding, Dot, and far away. In the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council, Ambassador Thomas Reed was about to have a conversation that would change the course of galactic history. The Morith were waiting. The Morith did not have a room. They had a presence. Thomas Reed stepped through the doorway and felt the temperature drop instantly. The space beyond was filled with a soft, crystalline glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The walls were not walls in any traditional sense. They were formations of living silicon, growing and shifting in patterns, too slow for human eyes to perceive. At the center of this strange space, something weighted. The Morith representative was not a single being. It was a collective, a cluster of crystalline structures that rose from the floor like a garden of geometric precision. Each crystal pulsed with faint light, and Thomas could feel vibrations passing between them. A conversation happening in frequencies his translator could not capture. Ambassador Reed. The voice came from everywhere at once. You are the first human to stand in a Morith chamber. Do you understand the significance? Thomas kept his voice steady. I understand that your species rarely meets with anyone. The fact that you requested this conversation suggests something important. The crystals flickered. It might have been amusement. Important. Yes, that is one word for it. There was a long pause. We have been watching your species since before you developed fire. We watched your ancestors descend from the trees. We watched them learn to stand upright. We watched them pick up the first burning branch and carry it through the darkness. Thomas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. You've been watching us for millions of years? We have been watching everything for millions of years. We are old, Ambassador Reed, old enough to have seen species like yours before. Fire species. Yes. The crystals pulsed in unison. In the history of this galaxy, 417 species have independently developed the use of fire. We have records of each one. Do you know how many survived to reach the stars? Thomas already knew the answer. Dr. Monroe's research had uncovered the same pattern. Very few. 4. Only 4 fire species have ever achieved interstellar civilization. And of those 4, 2 destroyed themselves within 1,000 years of first contact with the galaxy. 1 was destroyed by others who feared them. And 1... The voice trailed off. 1 survived? Thomas asked. 1 is standing before us now. Thomas felt the weight of those words settle over him. He had known humanity was rare. He had not known they were unique. Why are you telling me this? The Morith collective shifted, its crystal structures rearranging into a new configuration. Because you have done something unprecedented. Something we have been waiting to see for 60 million years. What did we do? You stopped. Thomas waited for more. Every fire species we have observed follows the same pattern. They discover fire. They use it to dominate their world. They develop technology. They reach for the stars. And then, when they encounter obstacles, they burn them. They cannot help themselves. Fire species think in terms of consumption and destruction. It is woven into their fundamental nature. The crystals glowed brighter, but you stopped. You had the Keth fleet at your mercy. You could have destroyed them. Every instinct of your evolutionary history demanded destruction. And yet you chose differently. Thomas thought about Admiral Cross and her fleet, about the medical teams and rescue operations, about the choice they had made together years ago to show the galaxy something new. We almost didn't, he admitted. There were voices in our government that wanted war. People who saw the Keth as enemies to be destroyed, not problems to be solved. But those voices did not win. No, they didn't. Why not? Thomas was quiet for a moment, searching for the right words. Because we've seen what happens when fire runs wild. We've burned ourselves before. Wars that killed millions. Weapons that could have ended our civilization. We've stood at the edge of self-destruction more times than I can count. He looked up at the towering crystal formation. But we also learned something. Fire is not our master. It is our tool. And a tool is only as dangerous as the hand that wields it. The Morath Collective pulsed with something that felt like approval. This is why we requested this meeting. Ambassador Reed, we have watched fire species destroy themselves over and over. We have watched them destroy others. We had begun to believe that fire and wisdom could not coexist, that the spark of creativity was always bound to the flame of destruction. And now we see a possibility we had abandoned, a fire species that learned to control itself, that chose mercy when destruction was easier, that reached out instead of burning down. Thomas felt hope blooming in his chest, but he kept his expression careful. What does this mean for humanity? It means we will support your petition to the Council. Our voice carries weight that most species cannot match. When we speak, the galaxy listens. Thomas let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thank you. Do not thank us yet. Our support comes with a warning. The crystals darkened slightly. There are others in the Council who will not see what we see. They will see only the fire. They will see only the destruction you are capable of. And they will try to stop you. The Keth? No, the Keth are broken. Their blockade has failed. Their fleet is disabled. They will accept whatever terms the Council offers, because they have no other choice. The Morath paused. We speak of others. A faction within the Council that has long advocated for the elimination of fire species before they can become a threat. Thomas felt the cold return. Who? They call themselves the Quiet Hand. They operate in shadows, manipulating Council politics to achieve their goals. They have destroyed fire species before, always making it appear to be accident or self-destruction. And they'll come for us? They are already coming. They have been preparing since they first learned of your existence. Thomas's mind raced. They had planned so carefully. Years of preparation. The attack on the Keth fleet. The diplomatic approach. The mercy that was supposed to win all eyes. And now they faced an enemy they hadn't known existed. What can we do? The Morath Collective shifted again, its crystals forming a new pattern. What you have always done. What fire does. You must spread. Spread? Your ideas. Your philosophy. Your understanding of fire. You must show the galaxy that destruction is not your only option. You must build alliances with species who will support you. You must make yourselves so connected to the fabric of galactic civilization that destroying you would mean destroying everything. Thomas nodded slowly. Use our fire to create bonds instead of burning them. Precisely. The crystals pulsed warmly. The Quiet Hand fears what you could destroy. Show them what you can build. Show them that fire is not their enemy. Show them that humans are not a threat to be eliminated, but an opportunity to be embraced. How long do we have? Unknown. The Quiet Hand moves slowly. They plan for centuries. But your demonstration today has forced them to accelerate their timeline. They will act soon. Perhaps days. Perhaps weeks. Thomas straightened his shoulders. Then we need to move faster. Yes. The Morath Collective seemed to lean toward him, though none of its crystals actually moved. And we will help you. Not because we are altruistic. Not because we care about humanity specifically. We will help you because you represent something we thought was impossible. What's that? Hope. The word hung in the air between them. For 60 million years, we have watched species rise and fall. We have seen the pattern repeat endlessly. Fire species burn. Cold species stagnate. Neither path leads to lasting civilization. Neither path leads to growth. The crystals glowed with fierce intensity. But you are showing us a third path. A way for fire to exist without consuming. a way for passion and wisdom to coexist. If you succeed, you will not just save humanity. You will prove that civilization can be built on fire. Thomas felt the enormity of what the Morath was saying. This was not just about humanity's survival. It was about changing the fundamental equation of galactic civilization. And if we fail, then the pattern continues. Fire species burn out. The galaxy remains cold and stagnant. And we continue watching, waiting for another spark that might survive. Thomas extended his hand, not expecting the Morath to take it, but making the gesture anyway. We won't fail. You cannot promise that. No, but I can promise we'll try. Every one of us. We've come too far and lost too much to give up now. The Morath Collective pulsed one final time. Then go, Ambassador Reed. Go and show the galaxy what fire can do when it chooses to burn bright instead of burning down. Thomas turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, the ancient collective watched him go, their crystalline minds processing what they had witnessed. For the first time in millions of years, the Morath felt something they had almost forgotten existed. Hope for the future. And somewhere in the shadows of the Galactic Council, the quiet hand was already beginning to move. The message arrived 3 days after the Morath meeting. Dr. Alice Monroe was in her office on Earth, surrounded by decades of research, when her communication system flickered to life. The sender was anonymous. The content was brief. They are coming for Sol. 7 days. She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she began making calls. 12 hours later, humanity's leaders gathered in an emergency session. Thomas Reed attended via holographic projection from the council station. Admiral Helena Cross joined from the Prometheus, still maintaining position near the disabled Keth fleet. Dr. Monroe stood at the center of the room, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. "The quiet hand," she said. "I've been researching them since Ambassador Reed's meeting with the Morath. They're real, and they're worse than we imagined." She activated a display that showed a network of connections spanning hundreds of star systems. Over the past 100,000 years, the quiet hand has been involved in the destruction or containment of at least 12 species. All of them fire-based. All of them eliminated before they could spread beyond their home systems. Admiral Cross leaned forward on her ship's bridge. How did they do it? Different methods for different situations. Sometimes they engineered internal conflicts, civil wars that destroyed civilizations from within. Sometimes they arranged accidents, asteroid impacts, solar flares, natural disasters that looked random but were carefully planned. Double quotes, Dr. Monroe zoomed in on a particular cluster of data. And sometimes, when they couldn't be subtle, they simply erased species from existence, made it look like self-destruction. Everyone assumed the fire species had burned themselves out. No one questioned it. Thomas Reed's hologram frowned. But the council would have noticed patterns. Surely someone would have realized what was happening. The quiet hand has members at the highest levels of council governance. They control the narrative. They decide what information reaches the public record. Dr. Monroe paused. And they've had a very long time to perfect their methods. The room fell silent. So what do we do? Admiral Cross asked. We can't fight an enemy we can't identify. We can't defend against attacks we can't predict. Actually, Dr. Monroe said slowly, I think we can. She changed the display again. This time it showed a star map of the region around Earth. The anonymous message said 7 days. That's not much time to assemble a fleet, but it is enough time to move existing assets into position. If the quiet hand is planning a direct attack on Sol, they'll need to come from somewhere. We can't guard every approach, Cross said. There are too many possible vectors. We don't need to guard them. We need to watch them. Dr. Monroe highlighted several points on the map. The Morith gave us something valuable: support, and the Morith have the most advanced sensor network in the galaxy. They've agreed to share data with us. Thomas Reed's hologram shifted. The Morith are helping us directly? They're helping us indirectly. They're sharing sensor data that they would normally keep classified. If any large fleet movement occurs within 10 light years of Sol, we'll know about it. But if we know about it, we'll also know who's behind it, Cross said, understanding dawning in her eyes. We can expose them, exactly. Dr. Monroe turned to face the full assembly. The Quiet Hand's greatest weapon is secrecy. They've spent thousands of years building the illusion that fire species destroy themselves. If we can prove they're behind an attack on Earth, that illusion shatters. They would never let that happen, Thomas said. They would call off the attack rather than risk exposure, which is exactly what we want. Dr. Monroe smiled grimly. We don't have to beat them. We just have to make them afraid to act. The plan took shape over the next 48 hours. Human ships spread out through the Sol system, positioning themselves at key observation points. The Morith sensor data flowed in continuously, tracking every vessel within range. Admiral Cross kept her fleet on high alert, ready to move at a moment's notice. And Thomas Red began reaching out to other species on the Council. We need allies, he explained during a secured communication with Earth. Not just the Morith. We need species who have something to lose if the Quiet Hand succeeds. It was Dr. Monroe who identified the first candidate. The Vrel were an insectoid species, one of the oldest members of the Council. They had been among the first to develop interstellar travel, building their civilization over millions of years. And according to Monroe's research, they had a secret. The Vrel homeworld experienced a massive volcanic event about 50,000 years ago, she said. Official records blame natural geological activity, but the patterns don't match. The eruption was too precise, too targeted. You think the Quiet Hand was involved? I think the Vrel were developing fire-based technology, thermal energy systems that would have made them much more powerful. And I think someone stopped them. Thomas made contact with the Vrel ambassador the next day. The conversation was difficult. The Vrel did not trust easily, and the mention of their homeworld's past brought up painful memories. But when Thomas showed them the evidence Monroe had compiled, their compound eyes flickered with something that might have been recognition. We have always suspected, the Vrel ambassador said finally. But we had no proof. We thought we were alone in our suspicions. You're not alone anymore, Thomas replied. And neither are we. The Vrel agreed to watch, to listen, to add their own intelligence network to humanity's growing web of awareness. One by one, other species joined. The Keth, still recovering from their defeat, agreed to share what they knew about the Quiet Hand's activities in their sector. A collective of aquatic beings called the Deep Song offered their unique ability to detect gravitational disturbances. Even a few members of species that had previously ignored humanity began paying attention. By the 5th day, the network was in place. On the 6th day, the Morith sensors detected something. 12 vessels, Admiral Cross reported from her bridge. Unknown configuration, moving through Sector 7 on a trajectory that will bring them to Sol in approximately 18 hours. Can you identify them? Thomas asked. No flags, no transponder signals. They're running completely dark. Cross paused. But their energy signatures are unlike anything in our database. This isn't Keth technology. This isn't any technology we've seen before. Dr. Monroe studied the data. The Quiet Hand has access to resources beyond what any single species could provide. They've been collecting technology for thousands of years. These ships could be from anywhere. It doesn't matter where they're from, Thomas said. What matters is that they're coming, and everyone is watching. He opened a channel to the Galactic Council. This is Ambassador Thomas, Reed of Earth. I am transmitting live sensor data showing an unidentified fleet approaching the Sol system. I am calling on the Council to witness this approach and to recognize any action against Earth as a violation of Council law. The response was immediate. Species that had been neutral suddenly demanded answers. Representatives who had been skeptical of humanity's claims now watched with growing alarm. And somewhere in the shadows, the quiet hand realized their plan was unraveling. The fleet stopped. For 3 hours, the 12 vessels hung motionless in space, their intentions unknown. Then, one by one, they turned away. They retreated back the way they had come, disappearing into the darkness between stars. Thomas watched them go, his heart still pounding. They backed off, Admiral Cross said, relief evident in her voice. They actually backed off. For now, Dr. Monroe cautioned. This isn't over. We exposed one operation, but the quiet hand is patient. They'll try again. They always try again. Thomas nodded slowly. Then we need to make sure we're ready. Not just for the next attack, for everything that comes after. He turned to face the holographic displays, showing all the species that had stood with humanity in this moment. We need to build something bigger, something that will outlast the quiet hand, something that will change the galaxy forever. Admiral Cross's image leaned forward. What did you have in mind? Thomas smiled. It was the same smile he had worn in the council chamber when he had first announced humanity's arrival. Tired but determined, ready for whatever came next. Fire spreads, he said. That's what it does. We've spent 40 years trapped in our own system, developing technology that no one else has. Now it's time to share it. You want to give away our advantage? No, I want to multiply it. Every species that learns to harness fire becomes another ally, another partner, another voice against the quiet hand. Thomas paused. They've been containing fire species for thousands of years because they're afraid of what we might become. Let's show them what we can become when we work together. The plan was ambitious. It was dangerous. It would take decades to implement, but for the first time since humanity had reached the stars, they were not alone. And somewhere in the shadows, the quiet hand watched and waited, planning their next move. The war for the galaxy's soul had only just begun. 50 years had passed since humanity first stood before the Galactic Council. The galaxy had changed. Ambassador Thomas Reed, now white-haired and weathered by decades of diplomacy, stood in a chamber very different from the one where he had once been laughed at. This was the Hall of Flames, built on a station orbiting a star that humans and Vrel had chosen together as neutral ground. Its walls were lined with torches, real fire burning in carefully controlled environments, a symbol that would have been unthinkable a century ago. Dot around him sat representatives of 47 species. Not the entire council. Something else entirely. A coalition of the Ember. Brothers and sisters, Thomas said, his voice still strong despite his age. Today we face the moment we have been preparing for since our founding. The quiet hand has finally revealed itself. Murmurs passed through the assembled delegates. They had all seen the reports. They all knew what was coming. 3 days ago, a quiet hand operative had been captured on the Vrel homeworld. Under interrogation, she had revealed everything. The centuries of manipulation, the destroyed species, the plans that had been set in motion long before humanity had even discovered fire. And one final, terrible truth. The quiet hand was not a conspiracy of individuals. It was a remnant, a survivor, the last ember of a fire species that had burned so bright it had nearly consumed the entire galaxy millions of years before the Council even existed. They called themselves the Kindled, Thomas continued. They spread across the stars, conquering everything in their path. They believed fire was meant to consume, that destruction was the natural order, that only the strong deserved to survive. He paused, letting the weight of history settle over the chamber. And they almost succeeded. They burned half the galaxy before the other species united against them. The war lasted 10,000 years. When it was over, the kindled were gone. Or so everyone believed. Thomas activated a holographic display. It showed a hidden system far beyond the borders of council space, where a small fleet of ancient ships had been hiding for millions of years. Some of them survived. They went into hiding. They waited. And over the eons, they changed their approach. They realized that direct conquest had failed. So they adopted a new strategy. They would destroy fire species not through war, but through manipulation. They would ensure that no one ever threatened them again. The Vrel ambassador, a massive insectoid being who had become one of humanity's closest allies, clicked in acknowledgement. They feared what fire species might become. They saw themselves in us, and that terrified them. Yes. Thomas looked around the chamber. For millions of years, the kindled survivors, the quiet hand, have been shaping galactic civilization, limiting its growth, preventing any species from developing the kind of power that might threaten their hiding place. But now they're exposed, Admiral Helena Cross said. She had aged as well, but her eyes were still sharp, still burning with the same fire that had driven her decades ago. They can't hide anymore, and they're desperate, more than desperate. Thomas changed the display to show a fleet, not the 12 ships that had approached Sol 50 years ago. Something far larger. Hundreds of vessels, ancient and powerful, emerging from the hidden system where they had waited for so long. They're coming, not just for Earth, for everyone, for the entire coalition. They've decided that if they can't control the galaxy through shadows, they'll burn it down and start over. Silence in the chamber, heavy and cold. The Morath representative, a cluster of crystals that glowed with soft light, spoke for the first time. We have watched this moment approaching for 50 years. We have seen the coalition grow. We have seen fire spread, not as destruction, but as connection, as warmth, as hope. The crystals pulsed brightly. We have also seen the kindled remnants preparing. We know their strength. We know their weapons. We know they believe they cannot be stopped. Can they be stopped? Someone asked. The Morath paused. That depends on what you are willing to do. Thomas stepped forward. 50 years ago, we faced a choice. We could have destroyed the Keth fleet. We could have proven that fire means destruction. Instead, we chose mercy. We chose to build instead of burn. He looked around at the assembled species. Allies who had once been strangers. Friends who had once been enemies. Now we face another choice. The kindled are coming with everything they have. They intend to wipe out everyone who has learned to carry fire. They want to prove that they were right all along, that fire species can only destroy. Thomas's eyes burned with determination. We have to prove them wrong. One more time. One final time. The plan was audacious. It required coordination across dozens of species. It required technology that had never been tested on this scale. It required faith that the bonds built over 50 years would hold under the most extreme pressure imaginable. 3 weeks later, the kindled fleet arrived at the coalition's forward defensive position. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus II, successor to the ship that had once disabled the Keth blockade. Around her, a fleet of 2,000 vessels waited. Human ships, Vrel ships, Keth ships, ships from species that had learned to harness fire in ways their ancestors could never have imagined. The kindled fleet was larger, older, more powerful in raw terms, but the coalition had something the kindled had never. Understood. All vessels. This is Admiral Cross. You know the plan. You know what's at stake. And you know what we're fighting for. She paused. Not just our survival. Not just our freedom. We're fighting to prove that fire doesn't have to mean destruction. That what burns can also warm. That what destroys can also create. She looked at the approaching enemy fleet. The kindled believe they know what fire means. They've spent millions of years trying to prevent anyone from learning a different lesson. Today, we show them how wrong they were. The battle began. It was not like any conflict the galaxy had seen before. The kindled fought with ancient weapons, designed to overwhelm and destroy. They expected their enemies to fight the same way. Instead, the coalition fought together. Human ships provided rapid strike capability, using thermal weapons refined over decades of development. Frel vessels created defensive networks that absorbed and redirected enemy fire. Keth warships, rebuilt with human technology, anchored the formation with their massive hulls. And in the center of it all, a single Morath crystal ship broadcasted continuously, relaying tactical data to every vessel in the coalition fleet. The kindled commander, a being of fire and fury who had waited millions of years for this moment, could not understand what was happening. His fleet was larger. His weapons were more powerful. By every calculation, he should be winning, but his enemies would not stay still. They moved as one organism, anticipating his attacks before he made them. They protected each other, sacrificed for each other, fought not as individuals, but as a single burning will. And then the humans did something impossible. At the heart of the coalition formation, Admiral Cross gave the order she had been waiting her entire career to give. Activate the Prometheus array. Across the human fleet, ships aligned their drives into a single configuration. Energy flowed between them, building, amplifying, becoming something greater than the sum of its parts. They had learned to harness their sun decades ago. Now they were harnessing all of themselves. A beam of pure thermal energy, focused through the combined output of 1,000 human vessels, lanced across space. It did not strike the kindled flagship. It struck the star behind them. The star flared, not destructively, not explosively, just enough to send a wave of electromagnetic disruption through the kindled fleet. Shields failed. Weapons went offline. Navigation systems scrambled. In an instant, the most powerful fleet in the galaxy was helpless. Admiral Cross opened a channel to the kindled commander. You wanted to burn the galaxy, she said. We just showed you what real fire looks like. And we chose not to use it to destroy you. The kindled commander stared at her image in disbelief. Why? We would have destroyed you without mercy. I know. That's the difference between us. Cross paused. Fire is a choice. You chose destruction. We choose differently. Rescue vessels launched from the coalition fleet, just as they had 50 years ago against the Keth. Medical teams, engineers, beings from dozens of species, working together to save the lives of enemies who moments ago had been trying to kill them. The kindled commander watched his people being saved, and something in his ancient eyes shifted. I do not understand you, he said finally. We are fire. We burn. That is what we do. That is what you were, Cross replied. It doesn't have to be what you become. 1 year later, the Treaty of Flames was signed in the Hall of Flames. The kindled remnants, broken in spirit if not in body, agreed to join the coalition. Not as conquerors, not as prisoners, as partners, as students learning to use their fire for something other than destruction. Ambassador Thomas Reed, his hair now completely white, gave the final address. 100 years ago, humanity reached for the stars. We were young. We were afraid. We had no idea what we would find. He looked around at the gathered species, at the impossible alliance that had saved the galaxy. We found enemies. We found friends. We found ancient forces that wanted to snuff out our flame before it could spread. He smiled, and there was warmth in it. Real warmth. But we also found something else. We found that fire is not destiny. It is choice. Every moment, every day, we choose what our fire means. We choose whether to burn or to warm, whether to destroy or to build, whether to fear the flames or to embrace them. The torches around the chamber flickered, casting dancing shadows across walls that had witnessed history being made. Today, we choose a new future. A future where fire spreads not as destruction, but as hope, as connection, as the light that shows the way forward. Thomas looked up, toward the stars, beyond the chamber's walls. The galaxy laughed at humanity once. They don't laugh anymore. Not because they fear us, because they understand us. And they understand what fire can be when it's carried by hands that choose to build instead of burn. He raised his hand, and across the chamber, representatives of 100 species raised theirs. We are fire, Thomas said, and we burn forever. Outside, the stars themselves seemed to glow a little brighter, and across the galaxy, in every corner where the coalition's influence had spread, beings of every shape and nature looked up at those stars and felt something they had never felt before. Warmth. Not from their suns. From each other. From the fire that humanity had taught them to carry. The fire that would never go out.